writers, how are you? It's Nancy. We missed a week. It's summertime, so there are vacations, or at least there are travels. I don't know if I would call what I just did for the last 2 weeks a vacation. To me, vacation is more about, laying on the beach. Although I don't really do that anymore because skin cancer. Anyway, that's not why we're here. So I want to welcome you. Today, I have a really awesome guest. I'm super excited to share with you. Lena Hendrix is a sort of new romance author, but you've probably heard her name because she is freaking everywhere. Super successful. And what I love about the chat that we had is that she shares some really actionable advice, some craft books that we haven't talked about before, and is just a really awesome, very friendly, fun to talk to person. So that is coming up in the interview portion in a little bit here. I will warn you that we had some technical difficulties when we recorded that. So if you are watching on YouTube, you will notice that we switch spots occasionally and that there's a few breaks that you'll hear in the audio version as well. So I apologize for that. My skill set lies in writing and potentially shooting the shit, BSing, more than in video editing. So I apologize for that. Luckily, I did learn from it. Although I will also caveat, it was not my fault. Okay. It wasn't Lena's fault either. But anyway, you still get everything you need to get out of that interview, and I think you will really enjoy it. In personal Nancy news, actually, Delancey has news. I had a 20s era, like a Gatsby era historical romance that I wrote. It was honestly was it the first? It was close to the first romance I ever wrote. So about 10 years ago at this point, I sold it to Harlequin, to their Carina, which was their online only UK based imprint. And so they printed a novella called Prohibited and also a full length novel called The Glittering Life of Evie Mackenzie. I did not choose that title. I feel like it's a bit of a mouthful, but, and both of those were with Harlequin for a while. They didn't do great. I didn't know how to market them, and I don't think they did either. So I got my rights back, and I had contemplated doing a Kickstarter, and I still kind of would like to, but not with this book. Anyway, I combined them into one book because it's all the same characters. So it's a long book. I produced a really awesome special edition paperback that has all of the artwork I commissioned. Well, some of the artwork I commissioned for the Kickstarter, which I ended up not doing. So I have full color illustrations inside the book. And then each chapter heading has this just gorgeous, like floral chapter heading. So full 2-page spread chapter headings with flowers. It's just a really, really beautiful book. Oh, actually, I have it. I can just show you if you're not listening. And if you're watching, it's called Bright Precious Things. I love this cover. And then I'll show you the interior. Let's see if I can find, like, for instance, that's one of the full page spreads for the chapters. And I'll show you, here's one of the illustrations. So it's just this really like moody 20s era speakeasy book. And it's a romance. And I'm just super excited about it. I'm actually going to produce the audiobook myself. I wanted to get it out simultaneously, but life intervened. So that will be coming out and will be available on my shop and probably other outlets as well. The ebook is available at Kindle Unlimited, and the paperback is going to be available both on Amazon, I think, but for sure on my site, in my shop. So you can just look for delancystewart.com and you'll get to my shop and you can buy it there if you're interested in having just a gorgeous book. I'm also going to produce a hardcover version. I've been waiting for the bespoke stuff at Book Vault to be ready to go, and I think we're there. So now it's just on me to get them the files. But I'm excited about that as well. So that's going to be like a gold foil with a ribbon and end papers and just very pretty. So that's exciting. And then what else is, Delancey is kind of not on hiatus, but I am planning my next hockey book. So I need to be working on that. But I'm, as you know, a bit distracted with my cozy mystery venture. So Nancy Stewart is releasing Keeled Over at the Cliffside into Kindle Unlimited on August 15th. That book is available for pre-order, and I'm super excited because I have a cover reveal Monday. So by the time this goes out, the cover will be up. And interestingly, I tried to pay a cover designer to do this whole series, but we just did not align. We didn't communicate super well. And she's a fantastic designer. I still love everything I've seen from her. I just didn't love what we were coming up with together. So I was kind of in a bind for this cover, and I am not a designer, as my PA will tell you, and any designer I've ever worked with will tell you. And so I kind of needed a cover, and I made one. So this cover is actually the first and probably only cover I have ever made myself. It's not 100% Nancy made, because my PA is a graphic designer and a photographer, and she's awesome at Photoshop and all the things. So she took what I did, said, "Oh, I love it. It's adorable. I'll fix it." And it needed fixing. So I will never be hiring myself out to do other people's book covers, but I'm pretty excited about this one. So look for that. And I'm working on the second cozy, which is bumped off at the bake sale. And I'm going to CozyCon on Sunday, 2 days from now. So by the time you're hearing this, I will have already been to CozyCon in St. Paul, Minnesota, a place I have never visited. So lots of exciting things going on. So I'm very busy, and I'm very happy being very busy. I think that's about everything. I don't have any new courses or anything coming, but if you are interested in the How to Write a Romance course, that is always available at the Evident Inc. website. There's also a blurb writing course there that you can check out. And of course, coaching is always something that I love to do. So if you're struggling, if you just need a quick, oh my gosh, I have lost the word, brainstorm. That's the word, brainstorm. I like to do that too. So just let me know how I can help you. Talking about stories is absolutely my favorite thing. And that is why I love to BS with writers. And I'm going to go ahead and push into the interview section and BS a little bit with Lena Hendrix. So I hope you enjoy. I am good. How are you doing?
Amazing. Thank you for having me. I love your show. So this is really, really fun for me today.
I love just BSing with people, so it works out well.
That's perfect. Yes, love it.
Where are you located, Lena? I know you've told me, but I don't remember.
I'm in the Midwest, so like a suburb outside of Chicago. Nowhere super exciting, but my whole family's here, and I call it home, so I love it.
That works. Okay, cool. Well, so can you start off by telling us a little bit about who you are as an author? What kind of books do you write? Are you indie? Are you traditionally published, etc.?
Perfect. Yeah. So my name is Lena Hendrix. I write spicy small town romance with an edge. I am fully indie. I have always been in KU. I've never been wide. I don't have any trad publishing deals, but I love the freedom that independently publishing gives me. So it's been a really blessed and fun journey so far. I started writing like November, December of 2020. So just sort of pre-pandemic. So my first book, my debut novel, came out in June of 2021. So it's been a whirlwind since then, really.
It has been, because you have been very successful in a really short amount of time, right?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I've been really happy with how things have gone. I've been pleasantly surprised. I am writing full time now. When I first started, I hadn't told anybody I was writing outside of my husband. And so I figured if I was really bad at it, if I sucked, then no one had to know. But things just really started to build really consistently. And then my 5-year plan kind of turned into a 3-year plan, which turned into a 2-year plan. And then I was able to stay home and write full time. So that's been, I've been doing that now for about 1.5 years. So it's been great.
You're living the dream. You're the example of what we always tell people not to expect.
Right. I mean, yeah, there have been times where, you think, oh, well, this is going to be the one, right? This is going to send me to number one. And then all of these things are going to change. And then you learn that it really is the consistent day in, day out stuff that really is what moves the needle. And so I'm here to put in the work, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, it's constant learning of what is working now, which you hope works in the future, but you realize that that's probably not the case. So you embrace the now, and then, just keep plugging away, because, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And so that's always been kind of the way I've looked at it.
Okay, well, so let's go backwards a little bit. We've got a lot to dig into there. When you say you write spicy small town with an edge, what's the edge? What does that mean?
So, it's been hard for me, when you're talking as an author, of like finding your comparable authors, like who are you like, where are the readers that are going to like, your books, but also other authors' books and things like that. And I found that, I'm not truly rom-com. I think that my books have fun and funny elements to them. But like, I don't personally think that they're like all that funny. I also love the cozy feeling of a small town romance, just that feel good hallmark. But I really like my books to have sex in them too. So there's that. And I also don't shy away from heavier, subplots or themes in my books. There are some characters who could be viewed as a little bit broken, or who've had heavier life experiences, that I put in there. I've had a sibling survivor of suicide. I've had somebody dealing with PTSD, some of those heavier elements that could maybe weigh a story down. But I think in my books, it's really well balanced with some of that lightness and humor and cozy. So that's been really fun.
So the edge is almost like a little bit of angst.
A little bit, yeah. And the angst is more, I think, internal, personal angst than relationship angst. I wouldn't say that my books are high angst when it comes to the couple.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. That makes sense. Well, so then before we dive into how you have become Lena Hendrix, what were you doing before? It sounded like you had a day job probably. So what did you go to school to become? How did you decide I'm going to write a book?
I grew up a family of like very blue collar people. My dad was very blue collar. My mom was a secretary. And so I didn't realize that writing books and making money and being an author or working for yourself was ever even an option. So I was always a reader, and I always wrote, in elementary school, and terrible poetry in college, things like that, but never thought that it was an option as a career. And so I went to school to become a special education teacher, and I did that for 14 years, and I loved that. And I transitioned into the administration side. So I was a special ed administrator for about 4 years. And so I did some writing that was more educational based, right? So grant writing and things like that, but never anything in the creative field. And then one day over a glass of wine, I had been reading a lot of romance books again, sort of gotten back into reading. And I looked over at my husband and I told him, I think I'm going to write a book. And he looked at me and said, well, can you do that? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm going to try. And so I didn't tell anybody outside of him for over a year. I just sort of was moonlighting as a writer. I got very lucky. There was an author whose books I enjoyed who happened to make a post in her reader group saying, hey, if any of you out there are writers, I've got this group of, writers, and we ask each other questions. And so I lied to her and said, yes, I am a writer. And we've since laughed about that. But I said that I was a writer because why not? And it was there that I started to learn about what it meant to self-publish. And then I sought out my own information and, what does that mean? And you just upload the book on Amazon? Like, okay, well, what does that look like? And then, looking at the advice that other people were giving and seeing what other authors were doing in terms of like, okay, well, you definitely need an editor. You definitely need somebody to do your covers for you, and looking at what that process looked like. And so when I did start writing, I think that's why that first book, it took me, 6 months to really figure out, okay, I've got this story idea and I'm going to write the book that I want to read. But then what? Like, what do I do after that? And it's amazing to me because I think that my process has evolved and changed so much since then. But it really just started as me wanting to read a specific type of book and I couldn't really find it. So I thought, hey, I'll just write it and see what happens. That sounds fun. And it's just really grown and blown up since then. So it's been really a lot of fun.
So what was different about the book that you first wrote from the books that you enjoyed reading? What was the thing that you weren't finding?
I think it was simple, right? I mean, it was just, I was looking, and I'm sure it's out there. I just hadn't found it, right? I was looking for a really specific trope combination. I love a brother's best friend because I am a little sister. And so growing up, I always, assumed my brother's friends were going to fall madly in love with me, and they didn't. So that was heartbreaking. And so I was like, what would be really hot is like a brother's best friend, but like he's a man in uniform. Like maybe he was in the military because I like that. And maybe he comes home and he's got all these tattoos because that's hot, but she realizes they're tattoos from her drawings because she wrote to him, but he didn't know it was her. And I just really just started like spitballing. And I was like, ooh, I like this. This is really fun. And I couldn't find that book. I was like, I want something that was spicy, but heartfelt, but a little bit angsty. And so I was like, you know what, I'll give this a whirl. I'll write it and see what happens. I think that might be something I could do and I might like. And I did, and I love it. And that's still, I think, not my best book in terms of like technically my best book, or I know over time my writing has improved, but it holds such a special place in my heart because I wrote the book I really wanted to read. And so I try to go into every book with that mindset of like, what would be really fun to read right now? And that helps me stay excited about the story, even when I hit that 60% mark and I hate everyone and I hate the story. It happens every time. But I think if I am excited about the story, that translates to the words that I'm able to write that day.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's interesting because when we're as writers, a lot of times, I mean, I've heard all different ways of going about diving into choosing what to write. For some of us, we look at the market and we try to identify who's our target demographic and what do they want to read. But I haven't heard anyone basically say, I'm writing for myself. Like I am my demographic. But I think that's smart because you are, a woman of a certain age, and that kind of is a not atypical romance reader demographic.
Right. Well, and I do look at the market a bit and I'm like, okay, well, single dads are hot, or, there are times where I'm like, ooh, hockey is really hot right now, but I don't write sports. I don't write hockey. And so I'm like, well, that's okay. I can sort of tease that out and put that on the shelf for, maybe another time, but I can look at what is something that maybe is hitting right now and weave that in or pair it with a trope that I really, really enjoy writing. And so then I'm hopefully hitting both of those things, right? And I also have what's called my id list. So the things that I love and the things that I find in either movies or books or TV shows or whatever that I'm like, ooh, I like that. I'll write it in my notes app. And it might be something totally random, like, he cooks dinner for her, or he, was really jealous. I like that. And I'll just type it down. And so sometimes when I'm thinking about whether it be globally the story or just a specific scene, and if I feel like, ooh, I want something punchy here or something that's really going to make this rich, I'll go to that list and be like, what haven't I used in a while? Or maybe what I have forgotten about, or, ooh, I really like, this type of scene. And so I write that for me if it fits within the story. So I think there's a way to marry both what the market wants, but what you as a writer like to write.
Yeah. Well, and you have to have what you as a writer like to write, or else what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, and I think you also learn what you don't like to write. I have one friends to lovers romance. And while I love that story, it was the hardest book for me to write because I was like struggling so hard with like, okay, these two very attractive people who really like each other, are not together, and what is a reasonable reason for that to happen? Like, what is keeping them from just being like, I like you, you like me, let's get naked. And to me, I missed sort of that snippy banter that an enemies to lovers or a grumpy sunshine dynamic might do. So yeah, that one was hard for me to write. And people love that book. And there are diehard friends to lovers readers who just love friends to lovers. But as a writer, it was very hard for me to write.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, so let's talk about tropes. You've mentioned grumpy and grumpy sunshine, and we talked a little bit about sort of angst and people with wounds, kind of broken characters. What's kind of your secret sauce? Do you go down a trope list and pick out 2 or 3 that you think you want to throw in there and then work it out? Or how does a story kind of form in your head? Does it start with the trope, or does it start with the character? How does it come to you?
It's a little bit of both, but it really does start with character and trope sort of combined, because I'll think about what either I want to write or what seems to be, landing or popular or whatever. And I'll be like, okay, I can weave this in, but I really dive deep into my characters before I even start writing the book. So I'll have a document where I just start like info dumping my thoughts on it. It'll have tropes, and then it will have character notes. And I always start with one character. So there's always going to be one character that's sort of speaking more loudly. And so I'll think about, okay, if it's the mailman character, I'm like, okay, what do I know about this person? And I kind of list those things out. I also really love the book, The Complete Writer's Guide to Heroes and Heroines. It has different archetypes for both like male and female characters. And so I'll think about the character and then I'll look it up in that book and be like, okay, for sure, he's the my hero. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's awesome. The Complete Writer's Guide to Heroes and Heroines.
Oh, okay. And there's co-authors down there. All right. I'll look it up and link it in the show notes.
Yeah. And I love this book because I can look at it and say, okay, so my hero is the bad boy. I go through the different archetypes and I say, okay, he's a bad boy. So then I can start looking at how do I craft a female main character that will sort of pick at his wounds or really press his buttons or challenge him in some way, depending on what the dynamic is going to be there. And then in this book, they do kind of give a very brief pairing of the male and female archetypes. So it's like, how do they mesh? How do they clash? And how do they help each other grow? And so then I can start developing some ideas of like, okay, well, how do they clash? And if that might spark a scene idea or that might spark something, and I can sort of follow those threads down a rabbit hole and figure that out. When it comes to knowing the characters well ahead of time, because I'm a really linear writer. So for me, I'm writing from the beginning all the way through to the end with very little shifting parts around. So I have to really know who they are before I start.
And here's the evergreen question, are you a plotter or something else?
So I used to be a total pantser. With book 1, I was like, I'm going to write this amazing story. And I did that for a few books where I was just like, it's a love story. They're going to end up together. It's going to be great. But then I was finding I was struggling at the same part of every single book. It was like 50 to 60% where they've gotten together, they're happy, and I am miserable because I'm like, okay, well then what? Now what's going to happen? I'm not really writing rom suspense. So like, there's not going to be a kidnapper coming in. What happens now? And so I found another book that I've read, a craft book that I love, is called The Nutshell Technique. And I have read tons of craft books. I really like them, but this one really resonated with me. It basically looks at story structure in a different way, and it sets up these things that you need to know about your story ahead of time. So when you start a story, what does the character want? And then it goes through all of these different, almost like beats that you hit. And that has helped me every time that I've used it, get me through that sort of 50, 60% slump. Because I can look at knowing, okay, well, they're happy and together, but I already know this is where things are going to get a little rocky for them, or where I need to go moving forward. And that slump gets shorter and shorter now with every book, which is great.
Well, so how many series do you have at this point? How many books do you have out? I know you told me earlier that you began publishing rather recently, like 2021. Is that right?
Yeah, so I started writing, like actually putting words to laptop, I don't know, words to paper in like November or December of 2020. So just like pre-pandemic. But my first book I didn't publish until June of 2021. But since then, I've pretty much released a book every 3 months since then. I'm on my fourth series. My 14th book, I think, releases on Monday. And my 15th is at the editor, and I'm starting to plot lucky number 16. So it's been an amazing journey. Yeah, it's been really fun.
So about 4 books a year. And so are most of I know you're doing small town. Are they interconnected series? Are they all in the same town? How do you keep your world together, or do you just sort of dive into a whole new world every time you start a series?
So all of my books within each series are interconnected standalones. And I have had a thread of like almost like a tiny little Easter egg where, series one kind of sort of connects to series two, but not really. Only really like dedicated close readers might see it. And now my most recent series, though, so back March of last year, I started writing the Sullivan series. And in that town, there are rival families. And so my first series were the Sullivans. And now book 2 of the Kings, the rival family, is releasing on Monday. And so I've stayed in the same town now for what will eventually be 9 books, which is a lot because usually by book 3, I'm like, I hate this town. I hate everyone in it. Like I'm so bored and I'm ready to move on. But this one's been really fun because I've been able to sort of explore in a way that I hadn't done before. So I've enjoyed that a lot, actually.
So are you doing, like, is it a Sullivan's book and then a King's book, or are the Sullivans done and now the Kings start?
Yeah, the Sullivans are done. They were 4 books. And then now I'm doing the Kings, which ended up accidentally being 5 books because at one point during the Sullivan series, I wrote in an extra brother that I hadn't like originally planned to do. And then I was like, oh crap. I was sitting there and I was like, okay, so we've got this one, this one, this one, this one. Oh no. And I wrote, and I realized I'd written in an extra sibling. But it all worked out because it turned out that sibling's one of my favorites. So yeah, so the King series will actually end up being 5 books.
Okay. And most of your series, are they 4 books?
My debut series was 3 because I wanted to give myself an out in case I needed to kind of pivot. And then my second series was 4, third series was 4, and then this one's 5. I think 4 is my sweet spot. I thought it was 3, but 4, I think, you get that great read through, and that's always really nice. 5, I think, is pushing it because I'm by that point ready for something new, ready for a new town.
Yeah. I talked to earlier, you may have seen it when I talked with Kelly Collins, and she had just finished, I want to say, a 26-book series.
That blows my mind. I couldn't even imagine. I mean, there's always these side characters that are like funny or quirky or, broody or mysterious. And you're like, ooh, maybe I could write a story about them. But then you really dig down and there are just some characters who are best served as side characters. I've written like the quirky side character as a main character. And I find that sometimes it's harder because they're the comic relief. And to sustain that for a whole novel can be daunting sometimes. But yeah, when I hear that, or people who've written, 13, 20 books in the same series, to me, that's wild. I think I'm too futuristic for that,
Well, it's got to be a whole other strategy because I think I'm kind of like you said, oops, I added a 5th brother. Now I need a 5th book.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, how many brothers could they possibly have? Like, they can't have 26 brothers. So there's some other, it's the cousins or the best friend's family.
Right.
Or, I don't know.
Right.
I think I limit myself with that whole sibling connection.
Or it's like an inn and the books are about the guests every time. So you're constantly having that revolving door. It would have to be something like that because, right, I think the family, interweaving the families, and my biggest issue with the longer the books go on is keeping track of everyone's ages. because I always want my characters to be 33. I don't know why. I'm not 33 anymore, but it's for whatever reason, I like that sort of like early to mid 30s for my characters. But as your series goes on, everyone's aging up. Yeah. And I'm like, crap, like how old are these people now? And to me, like timelines and ages get real muddy a lot, especially when you're in books like 4 and 5.
And then I don't know if you do this with yours, but if you do like a 3 years in the future kind of epilogue to show like them having kids or whatever, then you have to take that into account when you're writing the next book. Like, okay, well, like I kind of know where these guys are going to end up. Like I have to make sure I don't mess that up as I write the present tense again. And then if I do their future, I have to make sure it works with this other future I already sort of wrote. Like disaster. I can't.
All right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about your actual process. You told me that you are kind of a plotter and that you're a very linear writer, which makes my little linear heart happy because when people tell me they like to write out of order, I just get all like, ah. So what's your process look like once you've kind of figured out what your story is going to be? Do you use a coach? Do you talk to a critique partner? Do you work through things with your editor? What's next? Or do you just
It's changed over time. But I feel really good about what I've worked out for myself now. So, once I have all my notes down and I feel like, okay, I'm ready to open my document and start typing, I just go. I start with chapter 1, my opening scene, and I start typing. I have been using a developmental editor for the last 3 books, but I had used a developmental editor beforehand, but because I am a linear writer, what I found was sending somebody a finished document or what was finished story in my mind, and then having them come back and be like, oh, you should change this or do this. I was like, I can't do that. The story is already done in my mind. Like that doesn't feel good to me.
Yeah.
I tried it where, send half. And then she was like, oh, I would fix this in the beginning. And I was like, oh my God, I hate this. Like this sucks. But, so I did reach out to another developmental editor she does sort of copy editing for an author friend of mine. And we had talked about her getting into developmental editing again, but she wasn't sure how it was going to fit in her schedule. And so I pitched to her this kind of weird, wild idea of like, hey, how would you feel if I send you my book in chunks, like 10,000 word chunks? You fit it in because you can read 10,000 words fairly quickly. And then you just give me feedback as I'm writing it. Because if you find something that doesn't make sense, or you find something that needs to be beefed up, or you don't like, or whatever, you have thoughts and feedback, I'm good with going back and changing, 10,000 words or 20,000 words. Like I can tweak and redo that. What I don't want to do is retweak 90,000 words. And so she was like, I've never really thought about it that way. Let's give it a try. So for one book, we were like, let's commit to one book, and I will send her 10,000 words at a time. It's actually in a Google Doc. And so I just shoot her an email and just be like, hey, I'm at 10K. Feel free to check it out. And then she can add comments or suggestions right there in the Google Doc, which is great. And then I keep going, and we've done it for 3 books now, and I absolutely love it. I look forward to her feedback. It helps me feel excited about the story because I feel like I can fix and tweak things that need fixing, but I also get to see, oh, she's like really digging this right now, or I'm going to keep, pushing at this envelope because that's working right now. And so I've loved that process. I think that for me, as somebody who likes to write in order and likes to know that the things that I've already done are done, because I am a very futuristic, I don't feel like I'm going to have to go back to the beginning and rewrite everything, because I know that's pretty good. It's pretty solid. So that process has worked out really, really well. So then by the time I'm done with the book, she's done with the book, and I'll send to I have 2 beta readers, and I started sending the book at the same time I send to my copy editor. And so then the 3 of them are kind of reading it and tweaking it, or, making comments. And then I get that back and I go through all of that feedback in my self edit as I'm revising and fixing up anything that needs to be fixed up. And then once that's done, I send it to my proofreader, once I get it back from the proofreader, I send it to audio and then have everything kind of lined up, because for the last few books, I've done a simultaneous audio release, and that's been a lot to make sure you're ahead enough to do that. But it's been really good from a business perspective, and I've really been happy with that. So it's just I find the hardest is like relying on other people and other people's timelines for things to line up and mesh. I have to sort of build in some extra padding. And so I do that using Pacemaker because that's how I track my word count every day. And so I will say, okay, I know I want my book to come out on the 15th of July. And then I reverse engineer, what do I have to do to make that happen? Where do I have to start to make sure I've got plenty of time for all of those hands and eyeballs to get on the book before it's ready to go to audio?
Let's talk about audio. Are you producing it yourself? Are you going through like ACX, or are you using a company? Do you do dual narration? What do you do?
I do dual narration. And I have been using One Night Stand Studios. So I pay for it myself. Like I don't use Tantor or ACX or any sort of royalty share, which I waited to do audio until I could financially do that. I mean, that was advice that I had gotten. And when I'm in the room and smarter people than me are talking, I am always listening. And so even though I was super impatient and I just want to do audio, and I actually had an offer from Tantor, I decided to wait until I could pay for it with the business money. And I'm so glad that I did that, because I then, book with One Night Stand Studios. They take care of everything. They've been really amazing to work with.
Okay. And One Night Stand Studios is awesome. There are a few different companies like One Night Stand that you can basically pay to handle all of the headaches and all of the production. And I have used One Night Stand a couple times and found them to be awesome. So I will put a link to them down in the show notes too. Okay. Well, so that's audio. Let's talk a tiny bit about marketing, because I feel like you must have done something really right. I think the first thing that you did right for sure was very different than the way that Nancy does things, which was write a book, learn about how to publish a book. Nancy likes to, write a book, publish a book probably before it's ready, and then learn everything afterwards.
Right.
So that's only taken me about 10 years. Your process seems better. Can you talk a little bit about how you went from finishing writing to your first time publishing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, I love the actual process of writing. It's my favorite part of being an author is the actual writing. But even from the very beginning, I looked at it as a business. And so I knew that before I even write a book, and this stays true for every book that I've written, is I always start by thinking about how am I going to market this book? So, I think about things like tropes. I think about things like Theodora Taylor's, butter elements, like what makes a book irresistible and that they don't want to put down. I might have like those micro tropes, like a scene or two where I think that people are really going to love it. It's going to be quotable, and that's what they're going to pull from. And I have learned from my mistakes. I do have a series that I love, and if people give it a chance, they love, but it straddles two genres and not super successfully. It was a romance that it's a 4-book series that are former Mafia men who are in witness protection on a ranch in Montana. So they are Mafia cowboys. And I thought this was a great idea. And I loved this entire series, but I learned a lot from it about marketing and about hitting people's expectations, because I learned that it's not Mafia enough for the Mafia girlies, and it's not cowboy enough for the people who love cowboy romance. And so what I thought would be casting a wider net, and this is going to be amazing, and I'm going to get both, turns out you get neither. And so I knew it at about book 3 out of 4 that, okay, this is selling okay, but to me, I'm like, my debut series shouldn't be outselling this like new exciting series. And it was. And so I was like, okay. So then when that series, I wrapped it, I knew I'm going back to straight contemporary small town romance. I'm going to write what readers want and the things that I love. And I can have those sort of buttery fun moments within these parameters that I can sell and that I can market and that people are actually looking for. Because as much as I would love a TV show or a movie to be about a witness protection ranch in Montana with Mafia Cowboys, I also want to make money and I want to sell my books and I want readers to have the opportunity to read really good stories. And they're not doing that if they don't give your book a chance and pick it up. So I think about those things now and I am not too proud to pivot. And so I think about, what can I do to make a trope fresh and fun for me? What can I do to give readers what they want, but maybe in a little bit of a different way? Because now, the series, when I did that, when I pivoted back to, okay, I'm going to write contemporary small town romance, my books really started taking off. And so I knew, I was like, okay, that was the smart thing, is to realize what's working, what's not working. If my first series is working, I'm going to do more of that. And that's what I did. And it's what I continue to do. It's always changing. It might not always be that way for me, but that's just kind of when I'll figure out the next great thing. And maybe one day Mafia Cowboys will be a thing and I will have been the first, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And I look at it as a learning experience and I love that series. It just, luck and timing has a lot to do with it too. I mean, sure. I had written that before Cowboys were everywhere. And so it's, sometimes you do miss the mark, and that's okay. You learn from it.
Yeah. Well, so I know that you are big on TikTok. Can you talk a little bit about your marketing strategy outside of the writing and the actual publishing? How do you promote? Is TikTok a big part of that strategy, or are there other pieces you want to share about?
It is. I mean, TikTok is a big part of my strategy for now, right? While TikTok is hot and while TikTok sells books, because as much as I would love to say, like, no, it's just Facebook ads, which I do. I do Facebook ads. TikTok moves the needle and it sells books. I had my debut novel. I was really lucky and had a viral video, and it was like a 2-year-old book, and it got down to number 8 in the entire Kindle store out of one video. And it's just like, and you can't predict it, you can't replicate it, and you really want to, but a lot of it is kind of luck. But I have a presence on TikTok. It's a hybrid sort of model because I do post every day, but it's not always like me and my face. And so I have somebody who helps me sort of in the background and posts those really quotable moments and those really like juicy moments, so that I have something every day, even if there are days where I don't feel like making a video myself. Yeah. But I do sprinkle in, if I come across a sound and I think it's really funny, I will record a quick video. And, it's never the videos you think that are going to go viral, the ones that do. It's always the ones where you're like, well, this is kind of random, and you throw it up there and it hits. Or the opposite, you're like, this is so good and this is it. And you get like no views. So I don't rely on TikTok as my marketing strategy, but it's a cog in the wheel, I guess. Sure.
So the other cogs are Facebook ads. And then do you have kind of a launch strategy that you follow? Do you do like bargain booksies or BookBub or?
I have only ever gotten one BookBub, and I was kind of unimpressed. And so I don't rely on that so much.
And we'll kind of caveat, because you're a KU author.
Right. And I've heard it's like nearly impossible for KU authors to get a BookBub. I got one. It was for my Mafia Cowboy book 1. And I was like, this is going to launch it. It's going to be great. And I was like, it was just okay. And it was fine, but it like just barely made back its money. And that was it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to focus my attention on things that I know move the needle. And so to me, what moves the needle is with my marketing strategy, I do use Facebook ads. I also do a lot of building relationships with content creators. And so I started before anybody knew me, before anybody had any clue what my books were or who I was. I would use a PR company who could send out ARCs and do things like that. I have since in the last year taken all of that in-house. And so I send my content creator team, like I send them things for cover reveal and excerpts and things like that. I also send out some PR boxes because I enjoy putting those together. So for me, a lot of it is I like to pick and choose the things that I like to do. But yeah, so I have a lot of that buzz building before a release, which I think is really helpful because honestly, one of the things that sells books, in my opinion, you cannot replicate word of mouth. And so if you can get people talking about your book and, oh my gosh, I love this hero, or this heroine was so wonderful, or this scene, oh my gosh, if you know, and you kind of build that community buzz, that to me is like, you see that uptick of just, getting tagged in more videos, getting tagged in more posts, getting tagged in the end of the month roundups. So I would say like those three things is like, I maintain my presence on TikTok. I am cultivating those relationships with bookish people and bookish accounts. And also, on the back end Facebook ads. But one of the things I did learn about the community of sort of content creators is it's not always the huge accounts that, anybody can go viral on TikTok. Anybody can have that word of mouth. And I find those like mid level creators, if they love your books, if they're excited, you can't replicate that enthusiasm. I've paid some bigger influences in terms of like sending them books or, here's an audio code. And, you might get a Instagram story share, but like, there's nothing quite like a reader who gets a PR box, who is so excited and shares it. And then they're telling all of their friends and they're telling their book club. Like building that buzz has been something that really tends to move the needle a lot.
That makes sense. So do you have, you said content creator team, and that's a term that no other author has mentioned to me before. Is that separate from your ARC team, or do you have both? Or is this kind of, do you think, the new street team because TikTok has become such an influencer?
Yeah, I mean, mine has evolved over time. I had a dedicated ARC team for a little while where it was like the same chunk of people. But then the data was showing me, I mean, I would send them ARCs and I would see less than 60% were even opening them. And to me, I was like, that's not great. Yeah. And I want to get my book into the hands of people who want to read them. And so I started using PR boxes as sort of an incentive of like, hey, if you're on my list, there's no requirement to share anything, but I only pull from that list to get a PR box. And so then I just opened it up. People could sign up and I would send them like, here's the cover, here's the blurb, here's the, I send them sort of assets to share, and people do share it. And I think that they have that mindset of like, they're more likely to get picked for a PR box if they are actively, doing and sharing, and they're not wrong. Yeah. And then I use those PR boxes. I send them out so that they kind of arrive a few days before release and people can do their videos and share. And I also provide assets in terms of like, I might just send out like the blank cover, the covers, not pre-made graphics, because then they can make their own aesthetic that fits their page and, fits what they want. And I have slowly shifted to, instead of sending out ARCs to, here is this set ARC team, I post a link to sign up for ARCs, and it's a fresh link, fresh list every time. And it's more work for me and my team, because then every book have to go through and say like, do they get an ARC? But to be honest, like, it takes a lot for you to not get one, Yeah. Like it has to be like you've reviewed it poorly consistently and like you're just not my reader, but for whatever reason you keep asking for an ARC. Mostly if you want to read it ahead of time, I believe that sending out ARCs is very smart. I think because you get that word of mouth, I don't limit it a lot. I mean, I send out quite a few.
Well, and when you say picking someone for a PR box, how many boxes would you say you generally send out, and how do you choose who gets one?
So for me, I I started with 50 PR boxes and I upped it to 60. Okay. So for me, when it comes to, deciding who gets a PR box, this is always really tough because I would love to give one to everyone and that's just not possible. And so what I use my PA to help me. And what we do is we'll go through, and anybody who's on my content creator list is sort of eligible to get one. As long as you have a bookish account, whether that be Instagram or TikTok or whatever, there's a chance you could get one. I will go through with her and we kind of make a list of, this person is consistently posting about my books. This person is always, adding me to their posts or their lists or their compilations. And so they'll kind of get moved over. And then when I have my list, which is always more than the number of boxes I have, we'll go through and we'll put those names in a random name picker and kind of cycle that through so that it is a bit fair and not all the same people are getting the same people getting the PR boxes every time. And I like there to be a mix of like, when you're looking at in terms of engagement and following, I do look at that data, but it's not the end all be all, because especially when it comes to something like TikTok, any size account can hit and go viral. And so I also want that enthusiasm and that build. I never want people to be like, oh, well, I don't have 90,000 followers, I'll never get a PR box, because that's not what really they're about. I want them in the hands of people who are really excited about them. And so we have a whole range of content creators who just get really jazzed about getting a box. And the box always has like the book in it and then other items that either relate to the story or are bookish in general. And so it's always just fun to see people opening those. And, getting the email that they're getting one is always super fun to see their responses. So I enjoy doing them. I know lots of people don't like curating them. But as I'm writing the story, I'll think of something like, oh, that would be cute to put in the box. And I'll just kind of make a side note. And then as I'm finishing up the story, I start looking at, okay, realistically, what am I going to be ordering? What's going to go in the box? So it kind of happens gradually. And then I'm ready when it comes to shipping them out. So
that makes sense. That's a great strategy, because I've definitely heard of people doing PR boxes and not getting a lot back, but I don't think they put as much forethought into selecting the creators and engaging with them throughout the process. So
yeah, it's very important, I think, to me, that it's not just like, here's this box, sell my book for me. It's more of like, we're excited together. We are excited about this story. So when you get the box, it's really fun to see how all of the pieces, are a part of the story, or, there's a hidden meaning in the story, and this is that, and it's pretty much, I look at PR boxes as a thank you, right? It's a thank you for being excited about my stories. It's a thank you for sharing. It's a thank you for, being such a welcoming community. Because I totally full-heartedly believe that there's room for everyone at the table, and there's room for everyone to be successful, and we should be celebrating that. And it's not like, oh, well, here are my favorites and they get the PR box. It's, I try to spread the love if I can.
I love it. Yeah. All right. I have one more kind of focused question for you, just because I know a little bit about you from watching some of your TikToks and engaging with you online and editing in the past. I know you dictate, and I know that you have talked a lot about how you do that. Are you still dictating? And my biggest question about dictating is, obviously this is for my own benefit. Do you actually speak the words, like the prose that will appear in the book, or are you kind of blurting out ideas and then reworking it?
Yeah. So my dictating journey, I have to attribute to Janice Whitaker. I was on an author panel at a signing, and she was talking about how she dictates. And I pulled her aside afterward. I'm like, I need you to tell me everything. And she shared with me her process and how she does it. And I thought, oh, okay, great. I will literally never do that. And I tucked it away in the back of my mind. But then I would sit at my computer some days, without an idea, and I would just feel stuck, and it was beautiful outside. And I thought, if I could just get moving, if I could walk, if I could just get outside, I might like that. So I started using the voice like memo on my phone, but I have a pretty strong Midwest accent, and it got like half the words wrong. And I was like, well, that's not at all what I said. Or I'd be rambling and it wasn't recording. And then I was just getting mad. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get this like recording device that Janice recommended. I'm going to try it. If I'm out $40, I'm out $40. And so it's this small little black recording device. I speak into it as if I'm reading the story, right? So I don't speak any punctuation. I just go. That to me was important because I had worked with Drag and Dictate when I was a special ed teacher, and there's a pretty strong learning curve. And I felt really strongly that speaking all of the extra stuff, the punctuation and all of the formatting would throw me out of flow. And so with this, I just talk, and I can talk and pause and record and pause and record and pause on my walk. And my brain sort of clicks off when I'm walking. There's got to be something about the physical endorphins or something, because I can just dictate a scene and walk. And then I come home and the device connects to my laptop, and I did have to download a transcription software. It transcribes it, and then I have to clean it up. So it does take a little bit of extra time, but the word count I get out of it was nearly double. And so for me, I don't dictate every day. I mostly like to dictate in the spring and summer and fall months when it's not super cold in Chicago, but I use it to help me get unstuck. And I definitely attribute it to being a book ahead. It allowed me to be able to have a timeline where I can do simultaneous audio release. So I am a big proponent of giving it a try. It will be very clunky at first. You will feel like an idiot. You'll sound like an idiot. You'll wonder if your neighbors overheard the sex scene you just dictated. But then you just learn to not care when you see that word count output and you're like, man, on my 25-minute walk, I just dictated 2,700 words. Like, I can't beat that typing, So for me, even the time it takes to sort of clean it up after it's transcribed, it's worth it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And is that Mac Whisper that does the transcription for you?
That's what I downloaded, the free version of Mac Whisper. And then I have like a $40 Sony little recorder from Amazon. And that's all I do. And I had to get a little adapter, I think, to do a USB little dongle or whatever it's called into my Mac. And that's it. I mean, I was $40 all in.
Very cool. I don't know what I have like a block around this whole idea that I won't be able to, like, that there's something magical about the brain going through the hands and typing out and watching the words appear that I will lose if I'm talking, and that I won't be able to, maybe because I'm an editor, I'm very persnickety about formatting when I'm writing. And I feel like not being able to see that it's all happening will mess me up, which is totally stupid because it's not related to the story creation process, really. But I don't know.
It makes sense, though. And I think part of it is just giving it a try and trying to stay out of your own way. Because for me, I try to just imagine the movie, right? The movie in my head, and just describe what I'm seeing. And it needs cleanup. I add a little bit more detail or richness, or, certainly have to clean up things like, formatting and punctuation, but the good meat and potatoes are there, and there's a lot of them. And I liked that.
Yeah, no, it's super wise. I don't know what my block around it is. I've said for how long now? Like 2 years. I've been like, Lena, tell me more. Lena, tell me more. And I still haven't done it. But hopefully someone listening to this will. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing so many awesome tips, telling us about your journey. What's your book that you're working on right now, or what's the next thing coming out, and where can people find you?
I actually have a book coming out on July 15th. It is book 2 in the King series. It's called Just My Luck, and it's a Grumpy Sunshine, Single Mom, Romance. I love this book so much. It's very, very fun. You'll find it on Amazon. I'm in Kindle Unlimited, as are all my books. So you can check me out. If you want to connect on social media, I am most active on Instagram and TikTok. I love hearing from readers and fellow writers. So feel free, you can always message me, but I am most active on those two platforms. I do have Facebook Messenger, but it will sit in no man's land forever if you message me on there.
Good to know. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lena, for your time today and for sharing your wisdom. And do you have any parting shots before I stop our recording here?
No, thank you so much. I love this. I look forward to listening every time you post. I love hearing other writers' processes and being able to see what resonates. So I hope that maybe somebody got something out of this one too.
You can find story writing tips, tricks, coaching, and courses at our site, www.evidentinc.com. Get live feedback in our writing community at Facebook at facebook.com/evidentinc, and find past episodes of Story Strategy at our YouTube channel. Story powers the world, and we can't wait to help you tell yours.